So, welcome to the BFI for our evening of bad girls. Tonight, we're going to discuss all the women you love to hate on the small screen. So, all those unlikable, difficult, angry, confrontational, nasty, manipulative, and actually downright evil women that you've been watching on TV over the last 3 decades, I think we're probably going to cover. I think it would be right to say that television drama today is seeing a revolution in female characters. We're at last looking at women through a more female lens, which is a good thing. And it's a powerful time to be working in television, either as an actor or a writer, director, creator of a series. And a lot of the things that are happening now wouldn't have happened without the women, most of whom are on the panel tonight, who've come before and have laid the groundwork for that. So I thought I'd start by asking each of the women here, what is a bad girl and why do we like them? Because we do, don't we?
Mm-hmm. I don't know what makes a bad girl, but I think we kind of think of a bad girl in terms of if she does things that she wants to do, if she makes her own decisions. I think that's now changing because we have more women that are writing for women. But I think prior when we were doing, it's just, I think that's what made a bad girl. Oh, she's sort of making decisions on her own terms, doing the things that she wants to do, which is not necessarily bad, but and it's good to see it change.
She's captive viewing though, I find. Very watchable.
Yeah, bad girls definitely make the more interesting characters. They're the ones we want to watch. They're the ones we want to love to hate, and sometimes we want them to absolutely thrive.
And it's that shock factor as well, isn't it? When people are shocked that that's a woman doing one of those things, and that and that's a good.
And are you coming across more, Liz, in terms of creating, writing, and directing, or characters? Do you see them more?
Well, definitely, and more unleashed in a way, because bad girls used to be seen through a male gaze, and one had to cope with them being bad as a sidekick, so to speak, or a wife or whatever. But to be a protagonist bad girl who, because the grammar's changed a bit more and we've all become a bit more, sophisticated in the way we interpret things, we get to see a bad girl with vulnerabilities and with flaws. So really,
does she have to feel redeemable though?
Well,
Is that the only way? Because I think now she doesn't.
Back in the day, I used to.
Back in the day, I don't think they knew they were bad. I've never played a bad person. I've just played someone whose family needed me to do what I did.
They were misunderstood, weren't they?
But yes.
You're talking about Sable now, aren't you?
Any of them, yes.
And Lesley, do you? Because you've played lots of characters across film and TV and theatre, and I think in Mum you're playing a particularly lovely character, but in Harlots you're not, are you?
No,
which one do you prefer?
Well, I thought about that a bit tonight because they are complete polar opposites.
Yes,
but I don't kind of measure it in that way, and I suspect people on the panel who've acted don't think that way either, because I get as much fun out of playing the lovely Kathy in Mum as I do out of playing the really ghastly Lydia in Harlots. But I suppose what's nice is that the bad girls used to be historically such a rarity, didn't they? And they're not just the out and out bad girls, but I mean, I remember Helen Mirren on Prime Suspect.
Oh, decent Tennyson.
Yes, and it wasn't that she was a bad girl, but it was, first of all, it was one of the rare occasions. I know you've been part of many things where you've fronted them and it's been about women, but it was a rarity, wasn't it, a bit more back in the 70s and 80s. And when you were doing it and Helen was doing it with that, it was... What I loved about it all was that Helen was playing somebody who was, she drank whiskey and she wasn't married and she would have sex with whoever she wanted. And it was a kind of more about a freedom rather than being a bad girl. There was these women who were liberated,
different
and it wasn't that they were being bad. They were just doing what historically you'd mostly seen men doing.
I remember watching. I don't think anyone. Some of you might remember. Do you remember Butterflies?
Yes.
With Wendy Craig's character Rhea, who just did she wasn't bad, but she did the opposite. She couldn't cook. She was hopeless. She almost broke up the family by having an affair. And I remember thinking at the time, she is actually quite bad. She's quite a bad girl. But that is now, I think, that was probably worked because that was only one of the ways you could portray a woman who wasn't doing what she was supposed to do.
And the angel and the nurturer, and if you were going to be an anti-heroine, if you were going to be the antagonist, you were kind of evil, you know.
Yes.
There's a freedom in being able to write somebody evil,
Like a
but
pushing.
likable,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and complex and rounded
And also, she was racked with guilt about it.
Yes.
I mean, that was kind of the show, wasn't it?
She had to be likeable, didn't she?
She had to be likeable. And I know that when we were trying to get Harlots greenlit, which took about, this is me and Moira Buffini, the co-creator and lead writer on it, the amount of times we were asked, please, can't you make these women more likeable? And we were like, well, no, because
They're less watchable.
because you know these are sex workers in the 18th century. They have hard lives. We had protagonists and antagonists. You could say they were all antagonists, and sometimes and it's like you wouldn't ask that. You know, when they were pitching The Sopranos,
you would never ask.
I can't imagine someone saying, "Oh, could we have a bit more, touch more redemption, and could you make them a bit, a bit nicer?" So it was quite, it was tough to sell a few years ago. Yeah.
So before we play some clips, I thought I'd just quickly. So you were Sable Colby, but you were also Connie. Mm-hmm. Do you want to explain Connie for the audience? This was a brilliant TV drama.
It was, can a woman make it without old money or corruption in Thatcher's England?
And be in charge.
Yes. Can they make it? And the answer is no. Without corruption or old money, you can't. But she had a damn good try.
So I think we should have a look at the first set of clips from Connie and from the Colbys, which was late 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, they were very glamorous bad girls.
She was a wonder. Barbara Stanwyck got back 5 minutes before the end of lunch hour. She said that lunch hour contained being powdered on the nose and having their lipstick on, and she was back on the set on the dot. She was a wonder, that one.
Now, one of the things I wondered from, having been a fan and watched Dallas Dynasty, all of those big
Shoulder
set
pads.
pieces, shoulder pads, Chanel earrings, the whole lot. You were largely, the teams around you, the production teams, were men. Were they not?
No. Esther Shapiro wrote The Colbys and Dynasty, and she said she did it as if she had a doll's house, and she would move her characters around, and it was Esther Shapiro who did it. It was female driven.
It was her vision.
Yes.
So she was...
Aaron Spelling employed you.
Did you have in your head how far you could go in making Sable unlikable, an unpleasant character? But as you say, maybe she wasn't. She was just doing what she needed to do.
She was just doing what she needed to do.
Did people react to you outside of the show?
Oh yes,
Were
it was
they
wonderful.
scared of you?
It was wonderful. Nobody ever came and said hello or no. They just said it's her. She's, look at her. Look over there. But they never approached me. No, I was too scared.
In those days, it seems that you had to have quite a glamorous uniform to be a tough bad girl on TV.
Yes, and unfortunately, 5-inch heels. I mean,
Yes.
why? But yes.
Does what you wear make a difference, either acting or when you create the character, do you think? Because I work in fashion, so I often get mood boards presented to me, and there's an awful lot of Dallas Dynasty, all that on the boards. I mean, it must make a difference.
Huge difference.
Massive difference, isn't it?
It does. It does. It completely changes. It's the sort of the cherry on the cake. It just changes. It just changes everything. On Footballers Wives, we had I don't know how big the budgets were, but we had some seriously expensive clothes.
Going on.
A lot of and the jewellery, and you just transformed. It just made you feel completely different.
And when you're creating that character, as time has moved on, I mean, I look at Fleabag and I think obviously Phoebe Waller-Bridge has been intrinsically involved in how her character looks and what she wears. But in those times, through the 70s, 80s, and sort of 90s, I'm guessing men had a lot of input into what women should wear, and that is changing. Do you think?
Well, gay men. I mean,
it's
that's
quite canon, yeah.
all the best designers that
Yes, yeah.
made the most fabulous costumes. You know, you could have some really good girly natters with. I mean, and joyous it was. They understood every single detail and cared.
I think there was definitely a look that, you know, a kind of joining in and imitating, but matching the men's power suit and matching men on their level, on their terms.
Being more than you are.
You had to do as pioneers before, you know. And
That's what's interesting, actually, thinking about Bad Girls, which was exactly the opposite of that. Like
Yes.
the most unglamorous situation.
Oh, what a relief the Ugg boots were.
But I remember like getting my first costume, and you know, I'd figured out my walk and all this kind of stuff, and the way I spoke and everything, and then suddenly it put me in a tracky bottoms and a pair of buffaloes, and it suddenly Denny appeared. It's and the tattoo, and it was swagger, so it was more of a street mentality than a kind of glamour, and a kind of
it's tribal.
yeah, and it's survival, isn't it? Yeah,
It's all about survival.
All about survival.
From the Colbys to, you know, to Killing Eve, it's all about survival.
But feet do everything, don't they? I mean, Leslie, your little what do you call, what do horses have? Your little hooves. Your little hooves in Phantom Threads was wonderful. I mean, that must have been a very conscious.
Yeah, well, that whole film was about fashion, so
Yes.
those costumes were.
But those shoes were so.
But shoes are a big deal. You're right.
Harlots is a magnificent costume situation, isn't it? That's part
Yes,
of
it
the
is. Well,
whole-
that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a separate thing in itself, really, because
Yeah.
it's corsets and it's it's the late 18th century, and for my character, powdered wigs mostly. So that makes you feel very, very different.
There's a lot of cleavage on show. I just
Well, yeah, but
Not a lot of mine. I don't have a lot.
That's the wonderful thing about Harlots, is in that it was a costume drama. It is a costume drama that is not dealing with polite society. So the ladies, yes, they would wear modesty things over their boobs, but the harlots, they're for sale. So arms are uncovered and the cleavage is uncovered, because that's all you could have uncovered in public. And yes, we have some magnificent
Tits.
but also I think I believe you have input with the costume designers that we've worked with, and like Kate Fleetwood, who plays a character called Nancy Birch, who's a dominatrix. She wanted to cross dress, so she's always in a tricorn with trousers, and and when that happened, suddenly the character really emerged, and for us in the writers' room as well. So it all kind of works together.
Pulls it together.
Yeah.
If you were to play Sable today, how different would she be, do you think?
I don't think they could afford it. I mean, I know that I had at least once a week I had a £4,000 frock on, made for me.
Well, the Killing Eve costumes are a little bit expensive.
Are they?
With McQueen, there's a £5,000.
Oh, just nothing compared. I mean, that's just
But
you
as
only
a
wore them for that.
personality, would you change her in this era where women are more
don't
empowered?
think you
could she
have
be
all
more
that.
empowered?
Well, yes, but it's that what we did was all this terrible sort of. Well, you saw me doing one then, turning so that the camera
Loved it. Loved
that
it.
stuff. It's a different form, and also I was looking at the diction. We had diction then, and the whole idea now is to sort of overlap and muffled, and it's just different. And the acting
was
acting
different.
style has
very
changed,
different style.
Yes. I don't think I have, but the acting, yes.
I think one of the things that is noticeable about that time as well is that often bad girls were always, and I think actually in Footballers' Wives as well, conflict with other women. That was the only way. That was the that was the thread throughout. Less conflict with men, more with other women. Liz, when you're when that characters are kind of, how important is it now, and how important would it have been then? Has it changed? Because I sense that you don't need to have that all the time in drama.
You know, the thing to remember is that Footballers' Wives was satire, you know, and without the Dynasty and Dallas and Colby's and all that stuff, we wouldn't have been able to, you know, so the arena that we were working in was the alpha male arena of not of oil, of business, but of Premier League football players. And so that's kind of, you know, as alpha as you can get. And then with the zeitgeist explosion of celebrity as a thing, you know, celebrity for celebrity's sake. So, you know, we understood that the trophy wife was the trophy wife. I mean, you know, one can discuss whether or not WAGs as a thing would have existed without Footballers' Wives. But they were there, you know, that it was a thing. So the whole, of course, women in conflict with other women for their goal, which was generally speaking their man, because their man represented power, money, and status, in this goldfish bowl of celebrity, pits woman against woman, as it did, you know, in the Tudors. You're the puppet maker and the kingmaker and puppet master and the kingmaker and all of that stuff. But it's with a certain kind of knowing, affectionate wink to all the tropes of those uber alpha women who are going to catfight and this, that, and the other. But warts and all, and the difference is that with, you know, thanks to the earlier shows, you were able to stand back and actually with a knowing gaze. From a female gaze as well. Remember the locker rooms scenes? It was all male nudity. It was generally speaking about that. To look at the goals, the man, the money, the wealth, the celebrity, and the status, from a woman's point of view, and actually wonder, you know, is there actually the merit in that you think there is? Is that really what we want? And, you know, you can't question it if you don't show it. And, you know, there is a real... there was a world, and still does exist, where a woman is a trophy and dresses a certain way, and, you know, a footballer's wife, and with all that money, and but our characters were able to be more complex because written by I mean, not that women didn't write, but you were able to kind of scratch the surface a little bit more and look at their backstory, their vulnerabilities, and their complexities as to why perhaps they were rabidly killing each other to keep a man who, frankly, if you really look at him, why,
absolute,
you know?
And that's the thing, you know, you've also got to look at the background of a lot of these women. They came from working class backgrounds, you know, no education. They don't have mummy and daddy to sort of buy. So they were not just, it wasn't just a fight for the man, it was a fight for survival. I mean, this is their life. I mean, you know, and they were a big part of that. And people used to say, well, do you know anything about football? It's not about football, it's about the wives. And that's, you know, that for me, that's where I had to look at Amber's background and go, well, she doesn't come from a privileged background.
She was quite a complex character.
Yeah, you could say that. But yeah, so that's, you know, that's what they were fighting for, to sort of keep what they've worked for
and then at one point,
built.
Amber herself, you know, she fights tooth and nail, and God knows how many convoluted revenge plots to keep her man. And when he's kind of on his knees in ruins, and Tanya Turner's effed off to God knows where, she's sort of like, yeah, I don't think I want you anymore. And it was really kind of nice and empowering to be able to
do you think that from the Colby's era right the way through, maybe Alice needs to answer this, that actually if women were going to be bad, it had to be in a more camp satire place, whereas now, today, I'm asking the question, I'm not stating it's fact, now today, actually they can be a psychopath, that you can be any kind of bad or any kind of unlikable or unredeemable.
It's
you
sort
can
of normalising it,
We
isn't it?
didn't dislike her. That's what's so extraordinary. There's a psychopath who we all really wanted her to get away with it. I mean,
Totally.
no?
Do you think it's morphed through camp into being easier to write?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think it's so difficult, this one, because it feels like it's getting easier, but that you can do more. I know with Harlots, we really dug in and we were just like, we are not going to change our show. We are not going to change what we want from it.
I mean, for you who don't know, she is selling her children. I mean, that is...
Well, they're selling themselves, they're selling their children, they're you know, but this was a world and an era of absolute, where women had absolutely no economic value or freedom, and actually these women found a way where they could. They were the most socially mobile.
But in a way, once what you were saying about how difficult it was to sell the idea of harlots in the beginning, once that was done, I mean, the show was unique for me because it was just women across the board.
Yeah.
You know, we had Monumental producing it, who is run by two women.
It's an all-female
all-female
team.
directors, all-female producers, executive producers, a largely female cast. We do have a few token men.
Who are wonderful.
Who are wonderful. No, I'm joking.
I know you are.
And we've had female writers across the board, and you know, so it's the battle's been less, I imagine.
Yeah, but we do exist, I think, in quite we exist in a bit of a bubble in Harlots, because it's so that is normal
for you.
It wouldn't be the show that it is if you didn't have such a huge female presence.
I imagine not. I can't say absolutely not for sure, because we've never gone there.
Yeah.
But you know, it is entirely from the female gaze, and we just keep checking in with that, because even with a team of an entirely female team, sometimes you realise that a scene isn't working, and it's like, why isn't it working? Why doesn't it feel like the show? And it's because we are doing it from a more traditional point of view, and then you just switch it, and it's like, okay, there it is, and there's the show. But it has been great, wonderful working with all these women.
Maybe we should see some clips from
Splendid
Harlots
idea.
to get a sense of what we're talking about here.
Whoa.
So, watching Harlots, which is about sex and selling sex and sexuality, what things do you have to be aware of as an all-female team crew? Because it could be just everyone's going to watch it because it's about that subject matter. How do you tread that line so that
we've never thought of it as a show about sex.
Power.
It's about power. It's a workplace drama. It's a family drama. In the same way, I'm not sort of saying like The Sopranos, but you know, The Sopranos. That's about family. It's about so many
drama.
other things than the violence, and that's the way we approached it. And honestly, I think if we could have got away with doing the whole series without any sex whatsoever, we would have, but we couldn't, because it was just unrealistic.
Were there male people in the industry who had very distinct views on it, who wanted you to change it? Because as it's gone through the seasons, I presume, and there is a more open attitude to women generally on television, have you changed it?
No, not at all. I mean, there was a bit of a reaction. It's quite funny. There's quite a lot of humour in it, and we always sort of took the Georgians loved. They were witty people, and we always took the view that if you have a difficult life, you use laughter as a weapon, and we had quite a lot of pushback about that. They wanted to see more morality tales. I believe one note we got back was, "Can we see more dying whores, please?" Which was charming.
Don't let the women be funny, for God's sake.
And don't let them be funny, and don't let them have a laugh. So, I mean, we did just keep pushing back, and we were quite a formidable team of women. So in the end,
Did you like playing?
we kept going
Lydia?
with it.
I did
Which
like
bits
playing
of
it.
yourself did you pull out for her?
What are you suggesting? I did, but you know, I can't honestly say, hand on heart, that I've enjoyed playing bad girls better than good girls, because you take bits of pleasure from all sorts of characters that you play. But I have enjoyed playing, and there have been some truly delicious scenes. I mean, that's her quite contained. There have been scenes where she lashes out, where she rips off her wig and, you know, barks at people, and it has been great. But it's all of that is about working in the moment on the set at 8 a.m, and you kind of get the gloves off and you try and make a scene work. And that challenge is the same for everything. So I can't honestly say I enjoy the bad girls more than the good girls. But interestingly, I do. But I was thinking today about some bad girls I played when I was younger, And the way they used to make, the directors used to, male always, say, let's make her smoke. Let's have her smoking.
That's the sign that you're bad.
Because that's the sign. That was the sign in the late 70s,
Yes,
earlier, that
yes.
you were a bad girl, that you smoked, and that you might have a whiskey. You know, it's crazy.
Or instead of a sparkling drink.
I sleep better. I sleep better at night when I'm playing nice people. I think that it does get to you day
the
after
toxic
day after day
horribleness,
of
yeah.
being manipulative and power hungry and yes. Maybe I'd be better rested if I hadn't played so many nice
I definitely feel the
people.
opposite way. I really enjoy playing bad girls. Yeah, I really do.
It's like therapy. You get it all out at work.
Totally
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah.
No, it is because as humans, we're all capable of everything, right? And we
Yep.
choose our own paths and what to do and what not to do, and our own kind of morals. And so I think it's really interesting, just from a psychological point of view, to click into those bits that you're never going to go there and just get really dark and dirty and see what that is and explore that. And it's like you said before.
Carry on.
It's like you said before, it gives you, as a woman, that freedom you just don't get.
The freedom to be bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does
and to
it change
explore
you outside? Do you think, well, I'm going to take this back because it's cold, don't want to drink? You're a bit braver in your day-to-day life when you've played someone like that.
Yeah, I think actually possibly it gives you a confidence and a self-belief, a self-esteem, but, not licensed to kind of go and do those things in real life.
There's a kind of a sort of a spectrum of bad girls, isn't there? Because there's the you've anywhere from somebody who's in a position where they have to be bad in order to do good, or you're out and out psycho at the other end of it. And either way, it's like that the age-old sort of compulsion that we have to watch a horror movie or whatever. And as a writer and actor, there's the boogeyman is the thing that you're frightened of, and the boogeyman isn't necessarily man, and certainly not in these situations anymore. Quite often the boogeyman is your deepest fear, and in some of the later ones, Killing Eve, the boogeyman is almost a version, a mirror image of yourself, or your fears about not having had a child, having yourself replaced if you have a child and stop working, but all of or in Footballers' Wives, it was the fear of being replaced by the
Well, interestingly, the Lives and Loves of the She-Devil, which was of a similar era, she abandoned her children, she changed. I mean, that, I think, was a really fascinating character.
She's one of my
Faye Weldon had written them, it'd been brought to life. Was she an inspiration in that? Because I think she's probably been an inspiration for a lot of
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the evolution of those women who, whether they're that end of the spectrum or that end of the spectrum, are ruthless and prepared to do what needs to be done in order to protect what their goal is. And whatever their goal or their treasure or their precious or their, whatever that is, that's the thing that kind of changes and evolves as each generation goes on. It might, it was your family and your man, or it was your job and some, survival in a prison. It's got nothing to do with a man. There's no man there other than the clinks. It's about revenge on the establishment or women that betray other women, and your fear of lack of freedom. But
there is. Do you think there is more scope nowadays, perhaps, to write thoroughly evil, or create thoroughly evil women?
Thoroughly free. I think that's what we really have enjoyed with Phoebe Waller-Bridge's work. You just think, she didn't just say that, did she?
Yeah.
There's an extraordinary thing that she, as in Fleabag, is saying stuff that we just think, I cannot believe, God, I wish you were my best friend. Yeah. I can't believe you've just said that. And the characters that she wrote here, that freedom to be a psychopath, to be to just go kill and love it.
Yeah, and enjoy it. That's the thing. It's like you see these people really enjoying.
Yes. But it's also crazy that we're having to have this discussion.
Yes, I know.
But we're talking about stuff that blokes have been doing on screen for decades, and suddenly women can do it, and yes, it's new and great.
But it is only now is the time. I mean, that's
Women
ridiculous.
have been doing this for years, though. I mean, I remember reading A Scandalous Life, it's called, about Lady Jane Digby, who was sort of born into aristocracy, and she had multiple children with first cousins and whatever, and decided, being a mother's not really for me, and decided to move to Syria, where she met an Arab and who was 36. I think she was in her late 50s, and she lived the rest of her life out, but it was scandalous. So these women have been making decisions for years. It's just now that we've got women writing about women, and
I think
The Victorians put us back a few
I think you're
centuries.
right. Yeah.
But the long and short of it is that it sounds we'd all love to write more of this kind of stuff, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge has opened lots of doors for us, and she's been able to do that only because she did something absolutely maverick and genius, but slightly tamer beforehand. And so it swings and
I think
roundabouts.
but TV drama. So I think what makes the difference here is it's a series. It's on your TV. Everyone's watching. It's
TV drama.
I think that is a move forward. I think it is.
Definitely is a shift forward, but it's still all way too slow.
Yeah.
And it's still the number of ideas that do go by the wayside in favour of a man who's written something brilliant. I mean, I'm sorry, it just is a fact. If you look at the schedules and you look at who wrote what,
Well, there were 10 ITV dramas, weren't there, presented? And none of them involved any strong female.
We heard more than once, we've got our female show. And once...
No more wombs.
No, yes, oh, no. And the desire for the characters to be likeable
it's the
for a female audience,
a woman
and that's
would
I think
never do that. A
Well,
woman would never give her
vulnerability,
baby away. A woman would never
Abandon her family.
But she's had a miscarriage. She would be in shreds. Well, but she's not. And it's a very strange.
We had an all-female show in Tenko. And we were, thank you, and we were asked if we would mind growing our armpits if our husbands didn't object. And to a woman, we said, what the hell's it got to do with boyfriends and husbands? If this is the reality, that's the reality we'll take. Really weird. Would we mind growing our armpits?
Not that long
if
ago,
our husbands...
No.
This is a world we're still discussing the gender pay gap. It's just nuts, So it seems that we've moved so far forward, and absolutely we have. Absolutely, there are things being said and heard, and voices heard that haven't been before. But it's a long time coming, and it's still too little.
But Alison, it's kind of similar to what you were saying in the dressing room when you look at The Sopranos and Harlots, and you were saying that nobody really sits there and says, well, I think we need less violence or make them more likeable.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things as well is the perception is also about the audience and what the audience wants. And I think because Harlots has a very female cast, it's going to be women watching your show, and that's probably correct. But then think more of your audience.
Yes.
Just because you're a woman, watching TV, do you have to like everybody? I don't think so. And I think now, with shows like Fleabag and Killing Eve suddenly becoming these huge hits, perhaps that also might change the way that women are portrayed.
We don't cover women's sport because no one reads it, but you don't cover it, so they can't read it. So on that note, I think we should have a look at Footballers' Wives and Bad Girls. I think we're going to have a look at, so we've got a clips.
Changing the nappies with your diamonds on.
So, Liz, when it came out at the time, was it quite shocking? What were the reactions to Footballers' Wives when it?
I think that it was more. I think it was received with some confusion at first, like that it was outrageous and it was camp and it was all the stuff and. Then it was in the umbrella in that moment of celebrity magazines and the whole
reality
TV and Heat magazine, all that stuff, and then Heat got it, and would put it, as pick of the week, and all the irony and
humour
that we would kind of taking the piss out of. it all started to kind of eat itself or shag itself or whatever. But basically, it was, a mainstream drama where did however much fun it was, and it really was. We were consciously trying to say a couple of things about, that the trope of that. That woman who would fight to the death, a cat fight for her man, and all of that stuff, and what's it all worth really? So with Bad Girls, as I say, it was the opposite. It was the small, tiny, contained world where one tiny little minutiae, never mind diamonds or money, a nail that you found could be currency, and life or death, or
So Alicia playing that were quite physical. There's quite a lot of physicality in both actually shows. Is that at that time? Did you often wonder how far do we go? How violent can we get? How awful can it be? As a character.
Yeah, totally. Every single time we got a script, and I did it for 5 years, and every single time I got a script, I would go, oh my God, and just think, right, okay, are we allowed to do this? But then as we got further along, fortunately we had brilliant writers and a brilliant cast, and brilliant directors. So it's like you say, when you got on the floor, everybody dances, and you just want to make it as real as possible. I remember that scene very well. There's a bit after it, because that Denny and Shell just have to really enjoy that, and it's just horrible and
brutal.
Pseudomasochistic. Yeah, it's horrible.
Really
it's
grim.
violent and nasty, and you've got to make that work.
Prime time TV at the time, I think it was
totally.
quite unusual.
And I remember
really
at the
supported by the channel actually.
yeah, they were great, weren't they?
Yeah.
But I remember at the end of that scene, we had to set fire to Bobby in a coffin. And sounds really wrong, doesn't it? So we just set fire to Bobby in a coffin.
Friday,
Multiple day at work,
Yeah.
And then and they'd set it up. They did it all, fake, and they did the handcuffs so she could get out. And health and safety went crazy, making sure that she could escape whenever. And we're just meant to be standing there, getting off on it, and really, really enjoying it. And what happened was she panicked body bag so much that she locked the handcuff and the shed door, so she couldn't get out. So what she was panicking, and she was really screaming, like she was terrified for her life. Yeah. And we were standing there getting off on it and really enjoying it. And at the end, then they realised what was happening, and me and Deborah just went into shock, because you're in the moment and you're doing what you need to do, but then all of a sudden, humanity hits you, and actually what you're doing. And we had to all go off set and have a brandy and just think about what. But you can't take those moments too much, because if you think about what you're doing too much, then you'd stop doing it.
Again, it's not. I will say, of course, but it's not just gratuitous violence and all that stuff. It's gritty, but it's gritty with a purpose. Helen Bodybag, who is the one
she was
who's sitting
horrible,
there, was
yeah.
vile, and she
Yeah.
represented. She was a prison officer, and she had done numerous body searches where she said spread them and enjoyed. She's a sadist, and basically, she represents the male establishment and a woman who has betrayed beyond any.
Sisterhood.
She has betrayed her sisters, So this is payback, and who best to pay back than a couple of escaped cons, who one is an absolute psycho, Shell Doctor. But even our psychos there was a reason, Shell's mum was tricky. And Danny had a tough time and a heart, but it wasn't.
I think that's what.
Did you have to give them a backstory that made them believable? Did you feel, or could they
think
just be
that's absolutely pivotal to the evolution of today's bad girl? Is that it's not. We enjoy watching somebody behave badly, but it's got to be now. We demand a three-dimensional character that we can relate to, and with Tanya Turner looking at camera there. That's kind of an obvious example, but.
That was quite a new technique, though, at the time.
It was because
wasn't it?
we were. It was a season opener, and it was a way of recapping. But actually, she is our arch villain, and she invites you to identify with her. So we're not just watching a sort of a two-dimensional bad woman be a devil and a demon. We're invited to experience the joy of being bad with a character who actually is ruthless.
Would you have how much more bad would you have made her if you'd written her today?
Well,
Would you have made him more money?
I don't think you could. Tanya Turner being any worse than she was.
you do know she fake turned her babies.
Yeah, that's-
I do know that. Yeah.
There were so many things. I mean, we got our baby swapped, and because I'm darker than her, and I had the fairer skinned baby, she then Saint-Tropez'd it to death.
And bear in mind, Tanya's not a psycho. She's not a psychopath. Shell's a psychopath. I mean, she actually is.
Yeah.
She's you know, there is a real, you know, she's Jeffrey Dahmer and all those people. She's a psychopath. Denny's not a psychopath. She's a very troubled,
She's very vulnerable, really vulnerable.
kid who's led by a stronger alpha. Tanya Turner's not a psycho. Amber's not a psycho, but they are ruthless and prepared to do what needs to be done.
When you do a pilot for something like this and you present it or pitch it wherever you go, what do you think the reaction? How has the reaction, do you think, changed over the years to get to where we are? Because there must have been a lot of.
Well, I don't know because I've only pitched one.
gonna say, well,
I've only pitched one show, and the reaction was great and positive until we didn't want to do the things to make it a more acceptable show. I imagine if we walked into a room now with harlots,
Tick.
absolutely,
Yeah.
do what you want with the characters.
Well, even though that was only, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, I really do, because sort of since then, the whole Me Too and so much has come up sort of
Absolutely.
politically,
I mean, it's a lot.
you know, and
More of a voice, yeah.
yeah, and shows like Fleabag and Killing Eve, I mean, they really are game changers, I think.
And Big Little Lies to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
There's a big push, you know, that has been exposed in the press of you know, the disparities. So there is a real push for diversity in all areas, including gender.
But isn't it also partly because I have said this before, so it's boring if you've heard me say it before, but isn't it partly because there are so many successful films and programs that are heavily featuring women, about women, that are doing so well? So people in money situation, film companies, you know, the success of Mamma Mia and Best Exotic Marigold, it's like, oh, there's an audience of over 40-year-old women that want to go to the cinema, and so it can be lucrative.
It's absolutely commercial. Let's not pretend that
It's
everybody
led by a
is
commercial
worthy
viability.
going, gosh, we should.
No, exactly. Of course it
If
isn't.
if it's, you know, if it's bucks and box office, it gets commissioned. You know, there's a push towards that kind of.
But isn't it amazing that it's taken so long to realise that there's an audience of women who want to go to the cinema and watch television and see themselves represented in a
It's
way?
like Lorraine's Catch
Well, we
22 if they're
mustn't-
not watching it because it's not there.
We mustn't forget Betty Davis.
Yeah,
No, we
all
really don't
those-
forget
all
them. But
those
100%.
wonderful, strong women. I mean, do you really think they couldn't find anybody better looking than Betty Davis or Joan Crawford? Of course they could. They just couldn't find women with bigger balls.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean,
And
that's a
women that had
quote.
to fight to get certain projects made. You know, in an industry that was so dominated by men at the time.
But you think people are listening now, so there is money on the table and are more inclined to green light.
Proved itself.
because there's a proof of
Commercial,
it.
actually.
It's work in progress.
Yeah.
Shall we see some modern day clips then, The Replacement and Killing Eve, before we finish the questions? So they're much darker, those women, perhaps than some that we've seen. But I thought just before we close and go to questions, I would just ask everyone, who is their favourite bad girl from TV or film, or who would they want to play, or who would they want to write or commission? Layla.
It would have to be Tanya Turner.
Yeah.
For me, I just think she just didn't care what other people thought of her. She didn't make decisions based on anything but what she wanted, what worked for her.
Free, as Stephanie
Yeah,
says.
free.
Yes,
And
free.
that for me is progression. That's sort of, you know, I think it's just like Stephanie's, you know, it allowed Tanya Turner to be who she is. It's allowing the, you know, I just think it's sort of, it's in stages. And I mean, because I've worked, yeah, she's just fabulous. She's just absolutely fabulous.
Stephanie, who would be?
Oh, Bette Davis, All About Eve,
Yeah.
or so many of
And
them.
showing as part of the season.
Just
here.
Saturday afternoon, sucking my thumb, watching black and white Betty Davis is the heaven.
Leslie, is there anyone?
Well, I mean, I would have loved when I was younger to do what Jodie's doing in Killing
Villanelle.
Eve, because it's so it's so chameleon, isn't it? I mean, she's this and then she's like that, and that would
It's a
have
very complex character.
floated
isn't
my
it,
boat,
that?
definitely. Yeah.
And who stays in your mind as a great?
I'm totally biased, and it's maybe a total cop out, but it would be Lydia Quigley.
Yeah.
Because she.
You can't have her.
I gave her to you. It would be. I'm blushing now. It would be Lydia Quigley, because she's, it's the 18th century, and she's a boss, and she is nuanced. She's not just a baddie. She's not just a bad girl, and she's an absolute boss, doing everything a man would do and more, whilst playing them and getting them to pay her loads of money. Definitely Lydia Quigley.
Do you know, I've just realised I think I've got an issue with prisons. Because I really do, because when I was growing up, I used to watch Prison Cell Block H. And do you remember Vinegar Tits?
Oh, yes.
She was awesome. I think it'd have to be someone like her. Yeah. But
Stayed
again,
in your mind. As
She
the-
really, really stuck in my mind. Either her or like Grot Bags from Amy's World. Or something.
It's hard.
There's
isn't
so
it?
many.
It's hard, but I think quite possibly Bette Davis, but Baby Jane.
Yeah. Dancing on the
Like,
beach.
you're not right.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that we have, from letters that I have received, I say that with trepidation, because I don't think some of my means have been very good on the television. But yes, or in just a sheer escapism, maybe. But I think they have them power.
Yeah, and I can only go by when I view something like and how empowered I feel, and I do feel empowered with certain characters or certain
Did you
TV
get fan
shows.
mail then?
I got so much fan mail, but it was strange fan mail. It's not go there. It's like, can you
Empowered
take a
more odd,
picture
yeah.
with your toes out?
Did you get the bedwetter from Leeds?
I'm not sure that's
Will you take?
with your toes out. Not it's just bizarre.
Did you ever get a letter from Steve the Pipe Man?
Yes. Can you have
Did
a
you?
pipe? Yeah.
Can you take photographs of you smoking a
You're
pipe?
smoking a pipe.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
So glad you got
you
that
get
too.
some strange ones.
Yeah.
And I got it not just on Footballers Wives, on Holby, on
I got it on
Spooks,
Emmerdale's.
everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere.
Liz, do you ever have that in your mind when these characters are being created that I would, young girls are going to be watching, this is part or not, or is you're just making a character?
Yeah, I think, you know what, I think it's tricky because, obviously bad girls use their own strategies and things, to kind of survive in what they do. And obviously you don't want for people to go out and copy what you do. But it's the idea that girls can stand up for themselves, I guess, isn't it? It's that
Yeah,
sense
it's
of
a really big-
empowerment that you want to...
It's seeing a woman protagonist in. That's not to say male protagonists are not interesting. Of course they
Yeah.
are. But to see a female protagonist or a bad girl as the lead is really important. And little girls need protecting only so insofar as little boys need protecting. Of course, we protect children from things that But other than that, we should see people.
I think the other interesting thing is that I tend to get cross if my teenage girls are watching, some of the more violent crime things, because the women are always victims. They're always being murdered, and it's almost a consistent message that if there's going to be a horrible, gory murder, it will be a woman that is getting murdered. I'd rather they watch something.
And she'll quite often be a sex worker.
Yes,
as well,
exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had to stop watching the very first series
Luther
of.
that's
Sorry.
Carry on.
The very first series of True Detective, which I know was brilliant, and I know it was, but for one reason or another, there had been a whole series of shows on that involved brutalising and dismembering and women, Ripper Street and this kind of thing, which again, no disrespect to that, it's a brilliant show. It just happened I'd had enough of it, and so I watched sort of the first episode of this brilliant show, and it involved this woman was staged the whole time bent over, and it was just grim, and I enough.
That's the thing. Misery porn. Those were two words that came up a lot, and the stories are hard, and some of it, it's how they deal with the situation and the awful situation. And usually, what happens in Harlots is somehow or other the women find a way to beat it. Sometimes they don't, because that's realistic, but there's an awful lot of, as well as the antagonism, there's usually quite a lot of camaraderie.
And funny.
And fun, and then fun. We like to keep a sense of humour about it. Some of my favourite scenes in Harlots are not the high drama ones, but it's the one where the girls or the women are sitting around a table having a laugh. And I'm not sure whether this is answering your question, but it's normalising it, I suppose, and not looking at it with judgment, which I think quite often happens with shows with sex workers.
Yeah.
Hope that answered your question. I'm not sure.
Also, I mean, at that point, historically, 1 in 5 women in London were prostitutes, so it's quite a high ratio, really.
Revenge, I do think that's, and revenge is best served cold, so a well-planned revenge, I think, would be something that would be really fun. Just striking it off.
It was really great. It was the first show I'd ever been in which had such a huge female cast, and I think I was probably the only female character who wasn't attached to a man in any way, and in fact ended up being the boss of them all. So it's some of the most fun I've ever had, prancing around in front of a camera, chain smoking, because bad.
Yeah,
Except for your,
bad girls smoke.
Yes. Yeah.
except for your peanut death in Bad Girls, which
Oh
was
God,
pretty
stop
awesome.
it.
Sorry. If you're going to bring up Footballers Wives, I'm going to bring
So
up
I was
Bad
also
Girls.
in Bad Girls, and I came in for a couple of episodes as a nemesis for Yvonne, and she was a bad girl.
Yes.
She was
brilliant.
she was an absolute monster.
Thirsty with peanuts.
Yes. The fastest anaphylactic death shot you've ever seen, and it was very funny. I hope it was meant to be funny. Okay.
So I guess
That has diversity in it.
that's in the writing and the creating and the...
Yeah, and I think it is changing. We tried to make Harlots as realistically diverse as possible. Certainly in the first series. By the time we got to series 3, it was like, because there was that, it did exist in 18th century London. By series 3, we were like, okay, I don't care whether this young Asian man would be walking the streets. Then we're having him as a character, and so we're trying, and it shouldn't be so difficult. It shouldn't be too difficult. People like Shonda Rhimes do it. She does it brilliantly.
I'm a little bitter, actually, on the opposite side, because the whole of my family, the Colbys, are now people of colour. I can't go back and play the granny in America.
Do you think that there's an element of...
I do see your point, but...
casting directors just having a bit of a broader mind as well?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
It's not down to the casting directors. It's down to the program makers.
Yeah.
It's when you're in a room and you're storylining and you're creating characters. It's actually saying, does it matter?
Yeah, that's...
And it's
Does
not
it
a
matter that
diverse.
this
It's not
character is
just
white?
it's not a diversity. It's about inclusion. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about having characters of color, having gay characters, having transgender. It has to be about inclusion. Otherwise, diversity doesn't work. It doesn't mean anything if you're
not just ticking boxes.
Yeah, we're not ticking boxes.
There's a movie I saw recently. I can't remember what it's called, but it's really recent. It's a horror movie.
Yes.
Get Out?
Not Mark.
No.
Get Out.
Oh yeah, that's a great film.
Yeah.
Do you know, I came out of that movie, and I think I'm a reasonably integrated, balanced person. I understand, that there's a disparity there, big style that needs to be addressed. I was acutely aware after seeing that film that that's the first time apart from Moonlight, which was an all-black cast. So that's an all-black cast, and being black is neither here nor there in it, other than that's the precinct of it. But the experience, of course, is important. But what I mean is, with Get Out, it's the first time I'd seen a lead black family where there were white people as well, and the sidekick family was the white family. And I thought, God, if I'm seeing that now, and my experience, and I think I'm pretty open-minded and worldly and all the stuff, what if you never see representations of yourself as the lead on screen. And it's 2019, and I have just seen the lead family as a black family. Then there's something serious.
I remember on
It's
Footballers
systemic.
Wives with the couple who Fina's
Yes,
Fina,
exactly.
yeah.
Tremaine and,
Tremaine and Fina, and there was a wedding, Bruno's wedding, and they turned up, the couple turned up dressed as slaves, and people were like, "This is outrageous," but it's not. It wasn't done. It was because what they were saying was, we're just as talented as these. These white footballers,
were
but we
taking the
don't
piss
get
out
the
of what
Nike
they-
ads. We
yeah,
don't get,
yeah.
my wife isn't on the front page of Heat magazine
Yeah, yeah.
because of colour. And
Yeah.
so we dealt with these issues. We dealt with these issues really in a raw way. And America got it for some strange reason. When we went to America and we launched it in America, they got it from day one. It took 2 or 3 series
They got
before.
that side of it.
Yeah, they got that side
But
of
they
it.
did think it was an aspirational show,
Yeah.
which was slightly...
And these are, but these are issues that have to be discussed, and I totally agree with you. We need more colour on TV.
That sounds loaded, doesn't it?
Stephanie?
I have no comment to make about it.
Do people still see you as disabled, do you think? Or is she still part of your...
You're
She's
off
done-
bad goals, aren't you? I
done
mean,
so
so
much.
many
Yeah.
things that people just are sort of embarrassed and help me across the street, I think. I don't know. How has that changed? Yes, you're just somebody who's been on the telly a lot. No, people are very happy to, but they're a bit respectful. It's quite nice. Ooh, a remake or a reboot. We don't get it shown very often because we very foolishly paid the extras as cast members because we needed the huts to have the same amount of people and the same people. They couldn't change. So we were told that we haven't had it shown again very much because of the expense of it. I think probably would there not be... I think that now it wouldn't be Tenko, it would be... How about in one of those absolutely dreadful Libyan camps that are... I mean, there is a camp series to... Not camp, there's a camp series to be made about the people who are trying to get to Europe. And that would be very multiracial, trying to get to Europe. Why their stories? Can you not imagine what a good drama that would be?
I think there's some stuff in the pipeline.
Is there?
I've been reading about that. I'm sure there's something.
Because it wouldn't be Tenko. We wouldn't need to go to that war. I think we've got a lot of fights going on right now.
But still, it's a great series, and I would watch it again. I would watch a reboot.